Following the massacre at the Alamo, there were only 2 concentrations of Texas soldiers of any significant size left. One was under Colonel James Fannin at Goliad, while the other was under Major General Sam Houston in Gonzales. Each commander had about 400 men under them. In comparison, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna had around 7,000, although they were dispersed through the state and largely operated independently. Houston had learned about the fate of the Alamo on March 11th, or 5 days after its fall. He did not completely believe the reports, since he feared that the men who informed him were actually Mexican spies to sow panic in his army. He had the 2 men that told him detained until he could receive more reliable intelligence. Despite his skepticism, he wrote Fannin that the reports might be true. At the same time, he dispatched scouts to San Antonio to better understand the situation. On the 13th, his scouts came back along with Susanna Dickinson, her infant daughter, and William Barrett Travis's slave, Joe. Santa Anna had let them go to spread the word about what happened as a warning to other rebels. After meeting with the survivors, Houston decided to move east to buy time while he consolidated his forces to prepare for a battle against the Mexican army. He evacuated and burned Gonzales, beginning what historians call the Runaway Scrape. On March 14th, Fannin received orders to abandon his position at Goliad, also known as Fort Defiance, and retreat to Victoria. Despite the orders, Fannin delayed for a number of reasons. Although the situation was certainly a dangerous one, Houston allowed Fannin some discretion on how he was to fulfill them, stating that he should do so as soon as practicable, rather than possible. He also did not have all of his men with him. 2 of his subordinates, Colonel William Ward and Captain Amon King, had a third of Fannin's army. Ultimately, elements of the Mexican army would capture both officers along with the men under their command. Many of them would be executed in the Goliad Massacre that was about to happen. In addition to having a significant piece of Fannin's army, Ward and King also had most of his supply wagons, making evacuating Goliad difficult, especially since Fannin insisted to bring along his 9 heavy cannon. On March 19th, Fannin finally decided to move out of Goliad, but he did in the mid-morning. He lost time when one of his carts broke down and his largest artillery piece fell into the San Antonio River. That alone took an hour to retrieve. On top of that, the oxen became hungry, so Fannin decided to rest his men and animals after marching just 6 miles. That choice proved ultimately fatal. Near the resting spot was a wooded area where the oxen could forage and the Texans could have been in a defensible position. His officers pleaded with him to rest there instead of the open prairie where Mexican cavalry could encircle them. On March 19th, Mexican cavalry spotted them and began to attack. They ultimately surrounded the Texans, cutting them off from supply and ultimately escape. Despite their hopeless position, the Texans were able to kill about 50 cavalrymen and wound 140 more. The next day, artillery joined the Mexican ranks. Fannin realized the situation was hopeless, and he sought surrender terms. The Mexican commander, José de Urrea, responded that he was under orders from Santa Anna, and a decree from the Mexican Congress that the only acceptable terms would be unconditional surrender. All that he could do was to intercede on the Texans' behalf to Santa Anna. Those Texans who could walk made their way under escort to Goliad. The wounded, Fannin included, would not return to Goliad for 2 days. True to his word, Urrea wrote to Santa Anna declaring the captured men prisoners of war and recommending clemency. On March 23rd, Santa Anna responded to Urrea with an order to execute the perfidious foreigners immediately. In addition, he ordered the senior officer in Goliad, José Nicolás de la Portilla, to do so. Portilla was already under orders from Urrea to treat the prisoners well, so he was conflicted about what to do. Ultimately, though, the orders from Santa Anna superseded Urrea's, and he decided to fulfill them. On March 27th, the unwounded Texans were marched out of the town under armed guard. The Texans were unaware of their impending fate. When they marched approximately 3/4 of a mile, they halted, and the guards opened fire on them at virtually point-blank range. Most were killed by the volley. The survivors tried to escape, but were ultimately hunted down and killed as well. Fannin himself, along with another 40 wounded, was executed in the fort itself. He was the last to be shot. Before his execution, he requested that his watch be sent to his family, that they aim for his heart and not his face, and he be given a Christian burial. These requests were ignored. The executioners shot him in the face, claimed his watch as a prize of war, and burned his body along with the other Texans. Not every captured Texan died. Of those the Mexicans intended to kill, 24 managed to escape. In addition, 2 physicians were spared, taken to San Antonio to treat Mexican soldiers wounded at the Alamo, but they would ultimately escape as well. Sam Houston then commanded the only real Texas force. With an untrained army and the loss of 400 men, he chose to keep moving east to train his army and prepare a defense. This decision led to mass panic among Texans, who did not want to be associated with the one-sided carnage of the Texas Revolution. Santa Anna intended for civilians to flee and slow Houston down, as they would use the same roads. People packed whatever they could into their wagons and fled with their families. The spring of 1836 was particularly wet, making the roads muddy and difficult to pass. The rains also caused rivers like the Brazos, Colorado, Trinity, and San Jacinto to flood. Desperate people attempted to cross the rivers on ferries, which could only carry a few wagons at a time. The panic affected all social classes. Planters like Jared Gross had much to lose if Santa Anna's army arrived, as it could ransack plantations and free slaves. Santa Anna himself declared his intention to free any slaves he encountered, which would devastate the Texas economy and potentially lead to a slave rebellion. For example, as the Mexican army approached Victoria, slaves fled the fields in hopes of gaining freedom. Many Texas planters fleeing also brought their slaves, adding to the number of people trying to reach Louisiana. On March 30th, Houston reached Jared Gross's plantation along the Brazos River, where he spent the next 2 weeks drilling his army to prepare to fight Santa Anna.